On this episode, we discuss the essence of who we truly are. There's levels to the real us. We are part human and part being, and the two were created to operate as one. Tune in as we discuss a bit more about our inner self and spirit nature and what the physical self is really created to do, right here on LifeClub.
I'm Tashima Jones. Welcome to LifeClub. I genuinely believe personal development unlocks the door to the abundant and wonderful life we all already have. I also believe we must be intentional about seeking out that life in order to find and fulfill it. I am so grateful your journey of discovery has led you all the way here. Let's keep moving forward together. Once again, welcome to LifeClub with me, Tashima Jones. Welcome. You are tuning in to LifeClub with me, Tashima Jones. Super excited as always to have you here. Just rocking with me every single week. We are focusing on the essence of who we truly are. It is so vital and so important for us to recognize who we truly are. We have covered topics on our emotions, prioritizing our inner being, and even how to be our full selves. And today I wanted to focus a bit more on the makeup and nature of who we truly are within. To be quite honest, we are all engaging with parts of humanity, two parts of humanity to be exact, the physical self and the spiritual being within. Too often, we place more emphasis on the physical, aka the five sensory self, than we do the spiritual being. So a few of our talking points will be these two natures that we kind of coexist in, and then digging into more of that inner self. Now, it's true that we interact with the physical person by who we are and just by our five sensory self nature, if you will. So there's two levels. And when I speak about levels, you have to replace that or use it interchangeably with this concept of sight. We all know, especially if you're an avid listener of LifeClub, we all know that there are two sets of visions we have, two sets of eyes that we have. One that is surface level, five sensory realm level, the natural level that we experience. And then there is that spiritual perception and that intuition, if you will, about something more going on that we cannot truly see with our natural eyes. Remember the ultrasound and how they are supersonic waves that we cannot hear with our natural ear. And just because we cannot hear them doesn't mean that they do not exist. And the same is true for who you are. I always like starting with the voice when I think about the inner self. It's so interesting how each and every one of us has this tool called our voice that is invisible to the natural eyes. Yes, we can hear the voice with our sense of hearing, but it's so amazing how powerful our voices are, how everyone has a distinct voice. And that's why it's so amazing when other people can imitate someone else, because our voice is almost as if it's our fingerprint. And it really represents, it's that gateway, if you will, to the spirit person, the spirit being on the inside. Your voice is evidence of something that you cannot see existing on the inside of you. And it's so fitting because if you listen to a few episodes that we've done a few episodes back, you would have learned that the tongue is a muscle. I truly believe it's the strongest muscle that we have because it creates pretty much everything that we experience in the natural world. So once again, we are speaking about the essence of who we truly are. And as mentioned, we are dealing with two entities, two bodies. I kind of joke about how I'm part human, but in all reality, there is another part of who we are. So technically we all are part human, and it's in tapping into that other part of you that really changes, shifts, and revolutionizes your life. So we see the physical self, and that is the self that everybody basically interacts with. And it's so important, so vital for us to understand that the physical self is just the vehicle that the spiritual being is operating in. And it might sound weird, but when you really think about it, your mind and your inner being is directing, is guiding your flesh. It's guiding your physical body to get up, to go there, to do this, to say that, to watch this. So once we start to recognize the dual nature of who we are, we start to really become more alive, but because we start to operate differently. We start to understand the power of the being on the inside. When we speak about this inner being, it's almost as if it's your conscience. It's almost as if it is made up of what you know and what your truths are. And it's so important for us to also recognize that the flesh can do pretty much anything without it necessarily being true to the person on the inside. For example, a lot of us #play ourselves on a regular basis. I'm sure you and the person sitting next to you has been in conversations where you say one thing, but you really don't mean it. And sometimes this is done maliciously. Sometimes this is done just out of, I guess, the regular conversations. For example, it's so normal to say, hey, how are you? And the other person to say, I'm well, how are you? And you can feel really down and out on the inside, but that can typically be an automatic response to that question. Once again, when you start to recognize that the physical self and the five sensory self is really this vehicle that the spirit self, that the inner being is operating in, you start to see your body, your flesh as a tool, as a vehicle to get you from one place to the other. And when you start to recognize that, you start to see the physical self almost as if it's a servant to the inner being on the inside. And far too often we're caught up in the flesh, the five sensory realm self, that the roles reverse and we start to give into our physical selves and we start to be led by our physical selves. And that's oftentimes leads us into the direction that we really don't want to go in. It is very true that man does look on the outside appearance. And that's just something that's a byproduct or a characteristic of the natural self. But how many times have you seen someone who looked very pleasant and very nice and hit every, mark on the external, and then when they open their mouths, the conversation leads you to think otherwise? Let's just take a Selah on that. It is so important, so vital for us to recognize that, once again, the five sensory self is simply a vehicle for the inner being, the inner man, the inner self to operate in. It does not determine your value, although it might determine how many likes you get on social media. It does not determine how far you can go, although it may deter people from being your friend. Whatever the case may be, you as the individual have to tap in to and turn on this reality that's happening on the inside of you. So the essence of who we truly are doesn't lie in our physical self. It doesn't lie in the five sensory self at all. Because the five sensory self is just a vehicle. It is literally the tool that gets you from point A to point B. It is the servant of the inner self. And when you know this, like we know of any other definition, we are more equipped to use it properly. And not only that, we will take so much better care of our five sensory self if we understood exactly what it was used for. Because everybody, well, I don't want to say everybody, but a lot of people from time to time, or maybe very often, they're waiting on the physical self to want to act, to want to do, to want to go, to want to create. You're waiting on this sensation. You're waiting on the energy, or you're waiting on what we speak about is as time. You're waiting on these five sensory tools to want to do something. And in reality, it's the inner self, the inner being, who has to activate the five sensory tools and mechanisms and vehicles and all that good stuff. Remember, your inner reality creates the outer form. So the same is true for the inner being. The inner being creates or manages the outer form, aka your physical five sensory self. And if you really meditate on, chew on, and extract all of the nutrients for what it is that I'm saying, you will start to come alive inside. You will start to ignite that inner being that exists on the inside of you. Once again, there are two levels, aka two sights, two functions of vision that we have as wonderful human beings. There is the five sensory self, and then there is the spiritual self, and the inner reality creates the outer form. And the same is true for who you are as a human/being. Because honestly, the being part is the inner being. To be is to exist. It is to be alive. It represents a life. And the human part is the five sensory self. It's the flesh. It's the body. It's the tool, if you will, where the being exists in. I know you might have to take it all in. Once again, we are speaking about the essence of who we truly are. We have to understand that we are operating in two levels of being. There is the five sensory self, and then there is the inner being, aka the spirit on the inside. Remember, we cannot deny that the spirit realm exists. Gravity itself proves it to be true. The ultrasound shows you that there are things going on that the five sensory self can't even perceive. So we have to be transparent with ourselves, aka so light that truth can pass through it, and just basically accept that truth and that reality. And when we do, so much of what we talk about on LifeClub will be able to get on the inside of you and make sense the more you hear it. Now, we spoke about the five sensory self. We spoke about how your hands are created to do certain things. Your arms are created to do certain things. Your feet, your knees, your brain, your eyes, everything about the five sensory self has a purpose. It has a purpose. It can do amazing things. But it can be used for good or not so good things. And what you do with your five sensory self is determined by who you are on the inside. Now, I want to dig a little deeper into who we are on the inside. So I have to preface this with, I am still a student of life. And anything that I share with you is something that I'm learning with the understanding that I am still learning. The reality of the inner being is focused on what you know. Taking a deep breath on that. The reality of the inner being, the truth, the essence of who the inner being is focused on what you know. So many of us are operating on hopes, wishes, prayers, what ifs, and all of the above. And we are not operating out of a space of knowing. And you know that you know a thing when there is no doubt. You know that you know a thing when it's not even something that you have to think about and ponder. You know that you know a thing when there is no resistance. And when you find yourself in doubt or resistance, it can be this space of learning, hopefully getting to the space of knowing. Once again, one of the most profound truths about the inner being, the person who exists on the inside, is this concept of knowing. And far too often, many of us are operating in this space of I hope, I wish, I pray, and not knowing. Remember, nobody can walk up to you and call you a name that is not your own because you know your name. No one can come to me and call me anything except for Tashima. Because if they call me anything else, I may not even pay attention. Or I may look at them with the side eye and wonder why they're calling me somebody else because I know my name. And a lot of us don't know who we are. It's why we find ourselves in relationship after relationship or job to job or major to major or moving from state to state because we do not know who we are and where we belong and what we're doing and what our purpose is. We have no direction at all because we do not fully know who we are. And this is the danger in having the flesh, aka the five sensory self, lead us because it will lead us to whatever tastes good for the day, whatever smells good at the moment, whatever looks right for this particular occasion. And that's when we find ourselves wavering in our purpose and wavering in our actions because we really don't know. So we're doing everything that we may think or hope is correct, or we might do things that we want to do or want to experience, but we really don't fully know because when you know a thing, again, when you know the definition of a thing, you are better equipped to using it properly. The same is true for the inner being, for the self existing on the inside. And once again, the danger in following after the five sensory self or allowing the five sensory self to lead and guide you is that it was never intended to do that thing. It was intended to follow the inner self. Oh, let's just take a deep breath on that. It's why we oftentimes find ourselves striving for a thing, obtaining that thing, and then wanting another thing. It's why we feel some type of way after we get the job and then realize, oh, we really didn't want this job. It's why when we finally get that relationship, we find ourselves waking up feeling unfulfilled. When you do not know the inner being existing on the inside of you, when you are being led by your five sensory self, you are always in this constant state of trying to fill a void. And honestly, that's probably not the life that you want to live. We will constantly be on this chase, aka be forever thirsty, because we don't even know the drink that we're really looking for. We're just hopping on the next wave. And that's why you find so many people toiling to want more, to do more without. Basically, if you're not toiling or if you're not striving to be more, you will never be fulfilled by the things that you want to possess. So it's not necessarily in the doing, it's in the being. And if you don't know who you be, you will never be fulfilled. So just to recap our first half, we are speaking about the essence of who we truly are. We are operating in a dual nature, if you will, the physical, aka the five sensory self, and the spirit on the inside. We have to recognize that both are created to operate in harmony with one another. However, over time, things got a little separated and mixed up. And we all may find ourselves operating more in the physical self than we do in the spirit self on the inside. We have to recognize that the five sensory self is a tool. It is something that we use in the natural world to accomplish the goal, the purpose, the call of the inner being. And too often, we are being led by the five sensory self, and it leads us down roads, through tunnels and forests that we probably don't want to be in. I want to speak a little bit about our emotions. So that's a huge topic on LifeClub, aka energy in motion. And we speak about how thoughts are things that we meditate on and we allow them to become emotions. And that energy in motion leads our five sensory self to act, to behave, to do, to say, to create. And the importance of that is the thought life that we have, the emotional being that we can be. All of these things are interconnected. They are all building blocks of one another. Once again, the five sensory self is supposed to operate in harmony with the inner being. And it starts, yes, with our thoughts, but it's this whole process that we experience. And that's why we take a lot of time to to speak about our thoughts on LifeClub, because it is truly what we know that creates who we are. It's a huge part of who we are, because what you know is what you will eventually act out on. This is why you can take a person out of one environment, put them into an environment that's overflowing with abundance and everything that they need in the five sensory realm. But if their mind has not changed, aka been renewed to how to operate with the abundance that they've been given, they will literally deplete their resources and end up right back in that same environment that they came from, or bring down this environment of abundance to that same level of which they just were plucked out of. This is why when you have relationship problems, when you have money problems, when you have all of these problems and challenges and struggles that are going on in your life, you have to come back to what it is that you know, because a person who knows how to use certain tools is going to use them properly. So oftentimes, the thing that you are striving for is not necessarily the answer. The answer truly lies in what you know about the thing, so that when you get that thing, you'll use it properly and you can increase and multiply and produce more of that thing. That's why when you get into relationships, on the outside, everything may be on point, 110, and behind closed doors, it's just a hot mess of a situation. It's truly because a relationship is made up of the two people involved. And if those two people are a hot mess by themselves, it's just going to be a hot mess times two when they come together in a relationship. Because number one, it's not based on the health of that relationship, is not based on the appearance of things. It's not based on how much money is in the bank account, the house that they live in, the clothes that they wear, the cars that they drive, the degrees that they may have, and their background. It's not based on those external factors. It's based on the inner being of those two people. Once again, we are speaking about the essence of who we truly are, and we have to recognize, we have to understand that it first starts with what you know, what you are conscious of, what you understand about who you are. And if you don't know that thing, you are going to be swayed back and forth between whatever's trending at the moment, or whoever says what to you, or what new book you're reading, or what trip you just took. You have to be conscious. You have to be mindful of the inner being. And once you understand who you are on the inside, you are better equipped to move through life properly. So we spoke about what we know. We spoke about our vision and how there is a 5 sensory vision and then there's an inner being vision. We spoke about those things. I want to move a little deeper into character. So, character is something that grows, but it does not change. It's sort of like a seed. You plant an orange seed, it becomes a plant. You have the leaves and all that good stuff. It grows into a tree. It starts to produce fruit. Now, when you plant an orange seed, it's not supposed to morph into an apple. And that's what happens. I don't know why relationships is just being very helpful to me right now. But once again, you meet somebody, they are one thing when you meet them, and then there's something different 6 months later. Character is something that grows, but it does not change in its nature. So we are all still becoming. We are all still growing. We are all still maturing. And I truly believe that growth never ends because intelligence and wisdom and the inner being is truly an infinite entity. And it will continue to grow and blossom into something beautiful. So when you meet somebody or when you meet yourself, you'll learn that you will continue to grow, but you won't change. You won't change into a totally different person. And that is how you know you are not operating from the core being. Because when you're with this group of people, you're one way. And when you're with this group of people, you're another way. And again, you're growing, but the nature of who you are will remain the same. So oftentimes we have to uproot and unlearn a lot of the things that we've come to know about ourselves, about our inner being. There's a lot of thoughts that have been sown into the core of who we are that really don't belong there. And this is the process I call spiritual rehab. When you go in and you start to uproot and pluck up everything that doesn't belong there. And I truly believe that we are all created in love by love. And that's why hurt and pain and sorrow and toil doesn't feel good to us, because it was never intended to exist on the inside of us. It's kind of like if you eat some bad food and you get nauseous, what your body is doing is getting rid of this parasite. It's getting rid of this external entity that does not belong there. And it feels weird and it feels different because it was never meant to be on the inside of your physical body. And the same is true for negative, toxic energy. That's why it hurts. That's why it makes you feel sad. This is why you don't feel right. It's because it was never meant to be there. And we've become accustomed to pain. We've become accustomed to sorrow. We've learned how to live with these things versus understanding. Once again, when you know who you are, you know what thoughts belong on the inside of you and those thoughts that don't. You start to know, okay, this is not me. I am #playing myself by acting out in this way because this is not who I truly am. You have a certain standard for yourself. You have a certain posture, if you will, about who you are, what you will and will not do, and what you will and will not accept. So when we start to dig into our inner being and we start to recognize who we truly are, we have to truly pluck up those things that do not belong in our garden. We have to pluck up some weeds, aka some toxic people, some toxic behavior, and some toxic places that we probably shouldn't be in. And I have to stress this point. People are not your problem. A lot of us like walking around talking about the #haters that we have. And in all reality, the only hater that you are dealing with are the thoughts that you are meditating on that do not belong in you. People are not your problem. You are. And that's a really good space to be in because you are the only person who can control yourself. The only control that we have is of self. So that's a really good space to be in. If you find out that you are your problem, you're in a good space. Once again, going back to the essence of who we truly are, we have to recognize that the nature of who we are, the core being, if you will, is truly produced in love and made by love. This is why sorrow, sadness, and any toxic energy on the inside of you makes you feel weird. And this is kind of like the hard part and the challenge that I've experienced, is because love is your nature. So you are when you're in peace, you are where you belong. But oftentimes we are like, okay, what's going to go wrong? Because I feel too calm. I feel too peaceful. I am way too happy right now. Something has to go wrong. And the reason why we don't necessarily feel love consistently, and I use feel like in air quotes, the reason why we may not always be able to sense it is because it is our natural disposition. Going back to this concept of eating bad food, your stomach was fine. There was no high vibrations. There were no low vibrations. You was just chilling. Your stomach was good to go. Your gut was good. And then when this parasite, this bacteria that didn't belong there, got on the inside of it, that's when things started to feel unusual and abnormal. We feel, again, air quotes, we feel pain more than we feel love because it is our body, aka, or in this conversation, our inner being telling us that something is not right here. And I say that loosely because if you don't have a renewed mind and if you're not where you should be in your knowing, you might take something that is good and find a way to make it bad. That's a whole nother show. But I feel like I do have to say that oftentimes everything is all good. And then we kind of corrupt things and sabotage things for ourselves. And maybe that'll be a topic that we tackle on another episode. But for the sake of this episode, we have to recognize that our nature is peace. Our nature is love. Our core being is rooted in this space of goodness. And the reason why we feel off more than we feel on is because it is our inner being telling us that something is not right. And you have to be mindful of what you consider not right, because if you are not healthy in your knowing, a lot of things may be right and you might call them wrong. Okay, Selah. So going back to our inner being and just really dissecting it and understanding it. Once again, I am a student of life, like all of us. So this is something that is coming up in my personal life and me really digging a little deeper into who I truly am. There are levels to this. And the more you learn, the more you realize that you have to learn. And whatever I'm learning, I like to share it with you. Once again, the essence of who you are is on the inside. Our five sensory self, aka our physical body, is simply a tool that we use to accomplish the will of the inner being that exists within. And the inner being that exists within is about 99% made up of what we know. And there's a difference between what we know, what we hope for, and what we pray for, and what we wish, and the what ifs that we come up with. When you know a thing, there is no resistance. There is no war on the inside of you. And if you do feel resistance or a war, I'm not going to tell you, to give up, because perhaps you're in the process of knowing that thing, of learning it, of meditating and chewing on it until it becomes you. Remember, the inner being starts in the thought world. That's why it's so important for us to recognize our power to control our thoughts, our power to choose a thought, which is a thing, and we allow that thing to be planted on the inside of us, aka within our minds, and we meditate on that thing until we become that thing. I truly believe that life itself is this process of returning to who we truly are. In my mind, I've come up with this concept of when a baby is born, the baby is coming from the spirit world into the five sensory world. And from that first breath, that baby is on this journey of going back to where they came from. And I truly believe that's what life is. It's this process of just getting to know yourself, getting to know spirit, and accomplishing this supernatural purpose in the natural world. And I truly believe we're all superheroes, and that's what we're here to do. And that's part of knowing the inner being. But if you don't know who you are, you will never find out your superpowers. That's why it is so important for you to really tap in to the person on the inside. Now, I wanted to dig into some tips and tools on how to actually discover that inner being and cultivate a relationship with that inner being. And then to talk a little bit about how we, I don't want to use manifest, but for the lack of a better term, how we manifest that inner being in the natural world. So anytime anybody ever asks me, well, who are you? Two answers come to mind. Now, the answer that most people will probably get is the Tashima that they see, the mom, the sister, the friend, the host, the author, the teacher, all that good stuff. But who I truly believe I am is a manifested light being. If you have heard any of my freestyles, you would have known that, but I'm not going to, drop any bars right now. But I truly believe that I am a manifested light being, as we all are. Remember, the photograph is an image created by the use of light. The sonogram is an image created by the use of sound. And if you've done any research, you would know that we have light on the inside of us, like physically, like scientifically, we have light on the inside of us. This feels so good. We truly have light on the inside of us. And I believe that the physical self, the five sensory self, is this image produced by the light on the inside. Yes, welcome to my mind. So I say that to say, you have to understand that there is something bigger than your flesh operating on your behalf. There's a reason why you do what you do, why you sound how you sound, why you say what you say. And it's so much bigger than the thing that you see looking back at you in the mirror. So one of the most important things that you have to do, and one of the most important tips that you need to apply and really knowing the inner self, is that transparency, being so light that truth can pass through it. And when you sit down long enough and you really get quiet and you take a few sea lies consistently, you will start to understand that there is something so much greater and so much more operating in you and on your behalf that you can see with your physical eyes, each and every single one of us. If we took a moment, aka 1 minute a day, to meditate on the inner being, you will start to recognize that you are not the you that everyone else sees with their natural eyes. You have to be honest with yourself about that. And I think too often, so many of us are running away from the silence and running away from these moments of calm and peace that we really don't even sit still long enough to be honest with ourselves and be able to say, there's a little bit more operating in this space than what I see with my natural eyes. And this is on a basic level of humanity. This is nothing big, nothing weird, nothing out of this universe. Even though low-key, it really is. Yeah. You have to be able to sit long enough to admit to yourself that I am bigger than what I see. And when you do that, things will start opening up for you, not only on the inside, but externally as well. When you are honest with yourself and understanding that there's a me operating inside of me that I need to get to know, that I need to be real with, that I need to actually cultivate this relationship with. Because a lot of people feel stuck because they're operating in the five sensory self. They're not really tapping in to the inner being. And some of us are just afraid to be our true selves. Some of us are so afraid that we are not even our true selves when we are by ourselves. And that's really interesting. Let's just take a deep breath on that. Once again, we are speaking about the essence of who we truly are. And just on a basic level, you have to recognize, acknowledge, and accept that you are more than what you see in the mirror. And when you start to tap into that person, so many of the traumatic events will start to slip away. So many of the toxic relationships that you have will be dismantled. So many of the things that are operating against you in the natural world will start to disappear once you start operating in that spirit being that exists on the inside of you. We cannot look to the problem to find the solution. The problem is the problem. And a lot of the problem is constantly looking at the five sensory self and the five sensory realm to produce the solution. That is the problem in and of itself. Once again, if you are just tuning in, this is Life Club with me, Tashima Jones. Super excited to have this conversation with you about the essence of who we truly are. We have to recognize that we are dual beings. We operate in the natural realm. However, we are also operating in that spirit realm, and the two were created to live in harmony. Too often we are being led by the five sensory self, straying away from the inner being. And when those two collide and operate in unity, your life will forever be changed. Life Club never ends. We just have the 3 dots and we pick back up again. Thank you so much for rocking with me on another installment. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you are here with me. And for that, I am truly, truly grateful. All of my social media and contact information, as well as articles, videos, and more, and how you can join a Life Club, as well as download my app, TJM can be found on tashimajones.com. Remember your greatness. Talk soon. I am Tashima Jones, and you've been listening to Life Club. Thank you for tuning in.